Welcome back to Deep South EDC. I got a different one today for you. So usually this is some territory I'd leave up for my live streams, but I need some visual aids. So I'll be putting up some pictures up here of what's going on. So let me just explain a little bit. So I've been covering local New Orleans politics a little bit. It's what I do some of my live streams for, or rather that's what my live streams are about. So the New Orleans Police Department is heavily understaffed, getting fined because we don't have enough officers. We don't have a permanent police chief. And right now we're in the search for a police chief. We're losing way more police officers than we're recruiting. The mayor is corrupt. There's no other way to put it. I could go into detail explaining that, but anyway, long story short, crime is really rampant throughout the city. There's no police presence whatsoever. Criminals just do whatever they want, and I've seen New Orleans deteriorate to a dystopian city. It's pretty crazy. There's no traffic enforcement. There are so many cars running around without license plates. You could get away with anything here, really. So I was on Reddit, and on the New Orleans subreddit, I came across a post by somebody, username baseplate343, and the post was, "Today is my last day as an NOPD officer. Last shift today. I'll be pulling no punches and be as brutally as honest as I can be, so ask me anything." So I wanted to go through some of these questions. I'll be putting them up here and the responses that we get, because a lot of it is surprising. So, let's just go with it. Hey guys, Deep South Editor here. While making this video, I didn't realize how much of a deep dive it was going to be until we got into the editing. So I'm going to be interrupting some, providing some additional context and sources and things like that. So you'll be seeing a lot of me throughout the video, and let's just get to it. All right, last shift today. Very first question. How many officers are actually patrolling the district you're in at any given time? The response: there are 7 assigned to a platoon, so between 2 to 5 with people out for mandated training, sick, injured, and vacation. We'll also have to go sit in court for hours when we're subpoenaed, so sometimes you'll have 5, but it's really 4 because one unit is in court all day. Someone else asked, do you think that being able to call in remotely for court appearances would lessen the burden on officers? I assume there's no space for you to do anything productive while waiting at the courthouse. There's always some desk work that they haven't given you time to work on. He says, absolutely, especially when you consider a lot of the time I get called in hours before my shift or on my days off. I lived in the city for most of my career, but it absolutely wasn't uncommon for officers who lived on the North Shore to get called in on their day off just to show up and sit in court for 8 hours, just to be told that they needed to come back the next day or at a later date. Sorry about the sweat. It's 99 degrees out here with 100% humidity. Next question. What was your last straw? Baseplate 343 responds. It was a combination of getting absolutely destroyed at work by calls, with no help in the street, getting written up and bent over by PIB when people in leadership positions were crooked as a hillbilly's smile, screwing over the patrol guys and getting away with it, and idiotic policies that our job less safe and make more work for us. Meanwhile, they'll have admin cops who haven't been on the street in a decade or more telling us how to police and deal with the suspects, etc. I realized that the department was using my pension as a bargaining tool to keep me at a terrible, toxic job, so I pulled the plug. Deep South editor here. So I just want to note that in the last 3 years, NOPD has had a mass exodus of police officers leaving. That's retiring early, transferring to other departments like nearby sheriff's departments or nearby cities' police forces. And during all of this, there was a exit interview done on many of the officers, and most of the officers had said that it wasn't about the pay or anything. It was about the leadership, bad leadership, and just a bad, toxic work environment, as they describe it. So, in the description, I'll be putting a link to the story with all of these exit interviews, and you guys can read them for yourself. Someone asked to follow up. Can you provide examples of the situations you're describing? I don't mean names or too much specifics. I just mean a bit more context to help us understand. An example, why was there no help in the streets? Vaguely, what did you and others get written up for? No need to elaborate on how crooked leadership is. We all know that. What policies do you and others disagree with that make you feel your jobs are less safe and more work? So, we're going to be getting into some crazy, jaw-dropping, eye-opening stuff coming up. So, if you are a citizen of New Orleans, definitely pay attention. Baseplate 343 responds or answers. So on an average platoon, there's about 5 to 7 cops who actually get in a car and drive around answering the radio every shift. There are 4 platoons and 8 districts. So let's round up to 300 street cops. We're supposed to have 900 cops. Where the fuck are the rest of them? So some days you have 2 to 3 people on the street for a district. I even know one of the instances that a district had just 1 officer working. They then started putting admin cops, guys who stay in the station all day doing paperwork, on our lineups to make it seem to outsiders that we had put more cops on the street. They made detectives show up to roll calls for the cameras. It was all for show. 2 weeks later, and it's back to 3 to 4 cops on the street. No backup, no nothing. As for the policies, see my comment about the guy who killed the Tulane officer as just a small example. Someone quoted, "We're supposed to have 900 cops. Where are they?" I've been wondering about this for like 2 years. You can walk, bike, drive all over the city and go hours without seeing more than 1 or 2 squad cars and almost never see someone on foot patrol. It's insanity. So he responded, "That's how I feel when I ask for backup and get no one because everybody else is busy or tied up." And by everyone else, he means the other 1 or 2 people that he has in his district. So, in case this isn't hitting home enough for you guys, before Hurricane Katrina in 2005, NOPD had about 1,600 officers. After Katrina, it went down to about 1,200. And right now, as it stands, I did cover this in a live stream. We have about 900 officers, and they are including new recruits who are not actually police officers yet in their numbers. So they are inflating those numbers too. So the city is not being honest with us. I'm putting sources up here so you guys can see that. Um,
So like this guy's complaining, there's only 900 officers, and it looks like only about a third of them are actually out there on the street. So that's pretty insane.
All right, now we're going to explain what happened to that two-lane cop that he referenced, okay? Someone asked, would you mind explaining the policy that made the job less safe and more demanding? He says, baseplate 343 answers, sure. One policy we had that was implemented about a year and a half back was that if we're going to issue someone a citation in lieu of an arrest, we were no longer allowed to put them into handcuffs, search and secure them in the back of our police car while we wrote the ticket. John Shadowhorn, who shot and killed two-lane police officer Martinez Mitchum, was detained by NOPD and issued a summons in lieu of arrest the morning before he killed the officer. Had A, they had been able to search him, they might have found the weapon and the shooting never would have happened. And B, if the DA/sheriff not taking a catch and release stance with crime, that officer may still be alive today. He puts the source here, which I'll link down in the description if you guys are interested in checking it out yourself. All right, Potter Squash says, this is bonkers to me. Understand, I'm very pro-citizen and such things, but if you're going to issue a citation, have cause to do so. I don't see a problem in securing the person while you do it. That's not a stop and frisk. That's not a pre-functionary search. That person will get a day in court outside of the filing a complaint, etc. And frankly, putting in a cop car is better than handcuffs on street. Baseplate 343 responds, yep, it is by definition an arrest, even if you're just released with a paper citation. But this is once again people who don't think about what it's like to be a street officer while they make policy and not asking street cops to feel out flaws. The policies just don't make any sense. They don't make sense. Someone replied, that sounds like pretty good motivation to arrest people instead of issuing citations. He responded, we tried that. Our rank couldn't stand for it, especially during COVID. Listen to this, especially during COVID, when lockup wouldn't take anyone unless they were Jack the Ripper. Someone else asked, could any amount of money retain you? Or is it the only solution to restructure the NOPD? What would the restructuring look like to you in a perfect world? We get a drink of water, y'all. He answers, no amount of money. People should have realized by now that good cops do the job because they love being the police. All those cops have been driven away, and all that's left are people trying to make it to retirement or the young ones that haven't learned how bad it is here yet. Put every sworn member of the department on the street to answer calls for service. It's the backbone of what police do, and everyone at this point should be doing it. Fire anyone in a major leadership role and make the position of police chief an elected position. Green and Yellow 01 asks, how can women decrease chance of being carjacked when trying to load young kids in and out of cars? Obviously, we plan to move, but until then, any tips? Baseplate answers, I would say time and awareness are your best defense. I tell everyone in the city that I recommend if they learn how to use and carry a firearm daily, but it's always a last resort. I'm sure you don't want to put a gunfight with your children in the car next to you. I'm sure you don't want to get into a gunfight with your children in the car next to you. Pay attention to the vehicles driving up and down your street. If you see a Kia or a Hyundai, be on alert. You can use your awareness to give yourself time to react to what's happening. And if they try to take the car, let them have it and just get your kids out of there. Carry every day.
All right. So he mentions that if you see a Kia or a Hyundai, to definitely be aware. So there is one car stolen per hour here in the city of New Orleans, and uh, a lot of them are Kias and Hyundais, however you pronounce it. But apparently, there's like some hack where, I'm not going to go into it, but I personally know people who've had their Kias and Hyundais or Hyundais stolen. One person I know had his car stolen multiple times. And what these guys do is they still steal a car and then they go around with that car and commit other crimes and other carjacking. So that's why um, he specifically states, especially be aware if you see a Kia or a Hyundai, and just be aware of your surroundings at all times. And like he said, carry every day, stay well regulated. All right, I need to add more to this because earlier he stated that if he tries to pull someone over, they can drive away and he's not allowed to chase them. So if a car is reported stolen, he tries to pull them over and they don't stop and they just drive away. There's nothing the police can do because of their policy. So that just makes it even more ridiculous. So not only are these people who are stealing these cars going out and committing other crimes, but NOPD actually has no power to actually do anything about it unless they catch the person and actually in the act of committing the crime. Uh, they can turn on the lights and try to pull these people over all day long if they want. While they're in the city, though, the person doesn't have to pull over, and there's nothing the police can do. He said it himself, earlier. You know, so there it is.
I must not have screenshotted this original question, but he says, I love policing. It's NOPD that I couldn't stand. The people of the city always bear some responsibility for electing a district attorney who makes our job next to impossible. Someone asks if he could be more specific. He says, so we arrest people, take them to jail. The district attorney chooses not to hold them. Most arrests barely do a night in jail, if that. Or make deals, they get out. If he doesn't drop the charges outright, they go back on the street, commit more crimes, and all the police work and paperwork we did, it's worthless. That's especially frustrating when you have to fight someone or risk your life to make an apprehension. He puts an example here. I covered this story in a live stream about the man armed with a machine gun on Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras. So he links that as an example, and he says the gun he had was federally illegal, and the feds later charged him, but the guy was let go after cops apprehended him at Mardi Gras before the district attorney's office even read the officer's report. So if I'm that cop who just risked my life to get that machine gun off the street, was it worth it?
All right, I gotta cut in here because that's pretty ridiculous. So I did cover this on a live stream, but during Mardi Gras, the cops are always out there trying to like take guns off the street or whatever, when really it's just law abiding citizens trying to protect their families in a city riddled with crime. But this tourist was in town and he had a Glock and it had a switch on it, thus making the Glock an illegal machine gun. The police found him, caught him. However, they did it, I don't remember. I'll link to the live stream, but uh, the police let him go. They were like, "If you, what do you call it? Like, surrender your weapon to us, no charges will be filed." Which to me is a little confusing because NOPD and any police force takes any chance they can to publicize, the illegal guns that they have taken off the street, and they usually flaunt that all over social media. So I thought it was odd that they just gave this man a slap on the wrist instead of making a big deal about it, especially an illegal machine gun. I mean, that sounds like a pretty big deal. I mean, if I didn't know any better, if I were just a regular citizen, that sounds pretty scary. um, Luckily, though, or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, the feds ended up charging this person. So, you know, NFA violation there. But I think that that's crazy. They just they just let the guy go. NOPD for you.
Someone asks, do you have any sense of why Mayor Cantrell latches onto such awful people at NOPD? Chief Harrison, who seemed like a decent person, seemed to be run out by the mayor so she could hire Ferguson. Then Ferguson always came off as inept, and in retrospect, I think it's obvious to the public that his leadership was a failure. Now she seems to be doing something similar with Woodfork, finding another terrible person and doing everything to make sure she's installed. My guess, it's about finding someone who is loyal, but couldn't she find someone who's competent and loyal, or does that just not exist at the level of that department, or at the department? Also, let's not forget that Cantrell also wanted to hire Warren Riley until people talked her out of it. Maybe this question is too political in nature for this thread, but I'd appreciate your perspective of the mayor's leadership or lack thereof when it comes to NOPD. Bonus question, what did the rank and file think of the Vappy situation? Vappy is the mayor's head of security, who's accused of they're accused of fucking having a relationship. All right. His response was, they need to make the position of police superintendent, which is the police chief, an elected one, so the mayor can't exert influence and control over the police like she has done now. The latest appointment is just another example of nepotism. She lost her stripes once for an off-duty domestic incident that later most likely would have cost her her job. Leadership is most definitely the most toxic part about NOPD. Vappy is a protected individual, but we all hate PIB, so to see them get humiliated just solidifies the fact that the mayor and the in crowd can do whatever they want and get away with it. But if I curse on body camera, I'm getting written up for it. So the PIB is like the Public Integrity Bureau. That's like the internal affairs. Someone replied, all of the top 3 left. Woodfork and then a guy who killed somebody at a party. Not sure I agree with elected, since the general public is pretty stupid when things are left up to elections. Maybe city council approved instead, which is what we're already doing. That would mean a change to the city charter, since the city is set up as a strong mayor system. That was set up way before Cantrell's time, obviously. If I remember correctly, the city has to maintain... Oh, did he answer that one? Well, he pretty much on that one just said anybody who gets picked is just going to be a tool for the mayor. So, if I remember correctly, the city has to maintain a certain number of police officers, and they need to maintain some retirement fund for retirees. I can't see how they'll do it. The city, as much as I love my hometown, is going to shit. The mayor is a loser and City Hall isn't much better. Sweeping changes need to happen if the city is to survive. Do you want to leave the area? Have you thought about the North Shore, Covington, State Police? He replies, the pension system is doomed. Right now, I'm paying for the retired officer who came before me. When I leave, no one will replace me. Who's going to pay for me? And who would work for this shit job without a pension? I like being a cop and I've considered it, but the way NOPD treated me, I'm kind of leery of continuing in the field, but it may be my only choice to earn a decent paycheck. I hear from ex-coworkers things are much better outside of NOPD. All right. I've kind of touched on this one in a past live stream. He said, someone asked, Lone Cajun asks, what are you told to do when you see a bunch of people riding on the streets with the four-wheelers and dirt bikes doing wheelies and holding up traffic? He says, you can't do anything as per our policy, then links to the policy. I'll put the policy in the description. Someone asked, what's the main reason for leaving? He said he's sick of being sick and tired. The department is in free fall. In 5 to 10 years, you literally have no one here. And with the pension problems, who knows if the guys locked in will stay put. If you are in a protected position, administration, headquarters, or leadership, you'll be untouched. But God forbid you're on platoon, which is a street cop, and don't label your body camera videos, you'll get written up and bitched out. Here's another answer he gave to how many cops are actually on the streets answering calls on average, and what is keeping them so busy. I know we have lots of crime here, but I once called 911 multiple times to report a group of guys trying to home invade me. We wouldn't let them in when they tried to get us to open the door, and they kept coming back and trying to get in, getting more aggressive each time. And the cops didn't show for 3 hours. Then I got we're doing a shift change and you'll still want to make a report call. WTF could be going on that a home invasion in progress is not a priority call. He replies, you have anywhere between 1 and 7 cops. 7 is almost unheard of. I wish I could show you what our CADs look like. If you get a shooting, you need at least 3 to 4 officers. On a normal day, that's everyone on a platoon. I understand your frustration, but it's only going to get worse, and you're tricky on your own in this city. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to be honest. MVR asks, the mayor has repeatedly attributed the police shortage to the consent decree. Are the decree policies and procedures a factor for you? He says, yes, definitely. Not all of them are bad, but PIB is by far the worst. Having people who have never been cops tell us how to police is infuriating, but I recognize the need for police oversight. However, judging what we have to do in haste and peril from safety and leisure doesn't quite endear them to us. What are some things that supervisors, management write up street level cops for that shouldn't be a focus priority in your opinion? He replies, cursing, failing to label videos, and defending yourself after you're physically attacked. Someone asked, wait, if you're physically attacked, you're not allowed to defend yourself? He says, last year I was battered, physically attacked, and struck probably 5 to 6 times. No one ever got jail time for the battery on a peace officer against me. I defended myself. It's DL1s, write-ups, criminal investigation, and reassignments. Would be less trouble if I just let them bite, punch, kick me. Someone said, well, I guess Brass could have fun with the National Guard patrolling the city in a few years. which, if things get serious, that's a real possibility. He said, "Yeah, the poor guy showed up during Ida with no food, ammo, or armor. A bunch of 17 to 23-year-old kids with no idea how to police or even where they are in the city." It's also true. Someone asked him what they think they should do to fix the police department. He said, "Fire everybody above the rank of captain and hire that NYPD chief who evaluated NOPD some months back and push every cop out of administrative and non patrol jobs back out into the street to do patrol work."
All right, story time. So the NYPD, ex NYPD officer, police consultant that he's talking about was hired in September 2022. And I'll just read you the story. Police consultants plan to save the city calls for massive reassignment of NOPD officers to patrol duty. A draft set of recommendations by police consultant Fausto Picardo calls for the immediate redeployment of 212 NOPD officers from current assignments to patrol duty. A drastic move described as necessary to, quote, save the city. So they're talking desk cops, things like that, being put on patrol. Quote, action must be taken now if there's ever a chance to save the city and bring the reputation of being a city where tourists can come to party and celebrate and not become victims, Picardo wrote in a 9-page summary of his recommendations to the NOPD obtained by Fox 8. The residents of New Orleans also need and deserve to have a police force that can make them feel safe and be there for them every time they call 911. Picardo, who formerly headed the massive patrol division of the New York Police Department, was hired August 31st by Mayor LaToya Cantrell for at least a 6-month term as consultant working to revamp Superintendent Sean Ferguson's police department. Picardo and other retired NYPD Assistant Chief Thomas Conforti made 50 recommendations in the report. Sean Ferguson is no longer the police chief. This is an old story. Some of them, such as relieving civilian duty superintendent Aldrina Westbrook of command over the department's Public Integrity Bureau, which is the internal affairs, already have been implemented among a series of recruitment and retention reforms announced by Cantrell and Ferguson last Thursday. But an NOPD spokesperson said Tuesday that other recommendations and assertions made in Picardo's draft are not necessarily being imposed or are considered accurate. Quote, the 10-day scan is just that, a quick assessment by a different set of eyes coming from a different perspective, the spokesman said. As such, the document is more of a draft than policy changes etched in stone. The recommendation in the scan still need to be vetted for feasibility. The spokesman said the draft's reference to 212 commissioned officers who would be reassigned to patrol work, quote, is much higher than what is actually being considered. As the superintendent mentioned last week, that number is more in the range of 75 to 100. Whatever the final number turns out to be, somewhere between 10 and 20% of NOPD force not currently patrolling city streets will resume those entry-level duties soon, an NOPD source told Fox 8. So street patrol is entry level. So what? You get up into some sort of desk job and you don't have to do anything anymore. You don't have to be a cop. Like to me, I don't know about you guys, but usually when I think of a police officer, I think of answer the guy who comes to the calls, and you know, didn't realize that was beneath other police officers. It's just ridiculous. Quote, "We can't provide public safety or our own safety with those numbers," said Captain Mike Glasser, president of the Police Association. "Had we done it earlier, it would have been better, but we didn't. Are we going to like it? No, probably not, but it really needs to be done. We have to consider whether or not we can respond to calls for service for people who call the police. Whether we can get there is in a reasonable amount of time and given them the attention they deserve," Glasser continued. "Everybody's going to have to help to chip in, including command staff level rank. I'm going to have to go back on the street as a field supervisor, and I should. That's what we need to do. Under Picardo's proposed plan, a number of officers currently working administrative, general assignment, or district detective roles would soon find themselves back in patrol cars. So too would 40 officers currently assigned to the NOPD Special Operations Division, which includes motorcycle officers, horse-mounted officers, and canine officers. Court liaison officers, public record officers, cold case detectives, and as many as 10 Public Integrity Bureau detectives currently assigned to investigate complaints against police also would be reassigned to patrol work under Picardo's proposed plan. Picardo's proposed plan patrol. At its peak, NOPD had a headcount of 1,143 commissioned officers, Picardo wrote. With a workforce that size, the opportunity existed for NOPD to create specialized positions and units within the department without hampering its ability to provide adequate 911 response. This is no longer the case. This is the simple expectations that the police will arrive when you call them is not a current reality in New Orleans. Picardo's draft summary also said the increased patrol department was essential to keep safe another group besides residents and tourists, the police officers themselves. Anyway, this goes on for a while. I'm going to post it down in the link in the description below, but they ended up going with like none of this guy's recommendations. And I don't even know if he's still working with the city. Anyway, I think a lot of what this guy said would have been beneficial to the city of New Orleans. And because of Mayor Cantrell's, I don't know how else to describe it, but shittiness as a mayor, the city of New Orleans and the people of America are missing out because it used to be a great place to come visit. So. On to regular Deep South EDC.
Someone asked how much he makes. He said 65,000 base. Overtime, he makes 75 to 79. Here's a good one. Someone asked, how hard is it to get a DUI in this town? Reading other replies, it seems traffic enforcement is non-existent. I never wanted to be DUI, but it's not easy. Your report's got to be top-notch, and it doesn't hurt to know people. Traffic enforcement is non-existent, and the people who traffic enforcement really needs to target can just drive away from the officers, and we are powerless to stop them if we can't stay within the current policy, which is that policy that we talked about earlier. Someone asks, is that the main reason half the town drives without a license plate on their vehicle? He says if there's no consequence, why would they change their behavior? Whew, all right. Someone says, I've been following this thread since you posted it. Thank you for your service. I have a question. Anyway, is our police force situation the worst, among the worst, or indicative of most urban cities? He says, so I can really only speak for the city having only policed here. To me, it feels like it's hopeless. I really feel like in the next couple of years, this agency is going to cease functioning. But there are a lot of other smaller cities and departments who are in the same boat. All right. Someone asked what his opinion is of the current interim police chief. He says, not good. Typical nepotism hire, and the department will continue to flounder and fall apart. It's getting us some pro tips right here. Any places in the city you would absolutely avoid: New Orleans East, Central City, the Desire, the Ninth Ward. The likelihood of becoming a victim of crime is too high. Again, New Orleans East, Central City, Desire, Ninth Ward. All right, Awful Bliss 69 asks, do you think that the force will be able to recruit the needed officers to make things better? Things being the ability to respond to all legit calls, to have traffic enforcement. Thank you for doing your job, blah, blah. He says, if the department suddenly stopped losing officers tomorrow and hired 50 new recruits a year, it would still take 14 years to get us back up to strength. He also says he doesn't see that happening anytime soon. All right, here's a good one. Can you tell me what the levee police actually do? They protect the levee and everything 1 mile south of it, but have state police powers. They say they never seem to be doing anything, but that's interesting about state powers. Baseplate responds, my district has a lot of run-ins with them, and they seriously help out a lot. They used to be able to pursue vehicles that we couldn't, and we use them like our pit bulls. They are about as understaffed as we are. Sometimes they only have 2 officers for the entire city worth of levies. And I know sometimes it seems like cops are just sitting around doing nothing, but they are labeling videos on their phones or writing reports. All right, here's a good one. I've talked about this one on some live streams. Any insight to the interstate shootings? Is it all targeted, or is there now some randomness to it? NOPD never gives any follow-up info. He says it's all random. You got to understand that people in these neighborhoods have beef with each other. They all drive on the same interstate and run into each other. It just happens. There's no John Lee Malvo here. So there you go. According to this guy, it's all random. Someone said it's crazy how long feuds go on for. Yeah, and he says it's hard to do follow up when they use stolen cars with no license plates and go throw guns in the canal. It's not CSI. We can't solve shit in an hour. Someone asked, does NOPD have arrest or ticket quotas? Why do they rarely pull people over or do much of anything? I assume it's a combo of no quota and understaffing. He says, there is no quota, but sometimes the rank will ask us to try to make stops, but we never will. We're overwhelmed, and there's no way we'll go out of our way to make more work for ourselves to make the department look better. Also, there's no reason why anyone getting pulled over should stop and get a ticket when they could just drive away with zero consequence. In short, I'm putting myself at risk for no reason, both physically and at risk of getting a departmental write-up. I make the same amount of money if I sit and answer calls for service instead of going out looking for trouble. There you go. Someone said the lack of traffic stops and enforcement of basic rules contribute to a lot of the lawlessness feel of the city that's going on. Do you think some kind of push to tackle these more minor offenses will lead to more favorable public perception and improve the officers' morale? I guess it all comes down to hiring. But is there anything that can be done currently at staffing levels? He said no, because when we pull someone over and they've got warrants or won't sign the ticket and therefore have to be arrested and fight us, we won't be backed up by the bosses. Look at it from a street cop's perspective. There's no reason to risk our job, our freedom, and our careers for charges that won't be pursued by the district attorney anyway. What do you mean they can just drive away with zero consequences? You mean if a cop flashes you and you just keep driving and don't pull over, they won't pursue you? He says, New Orleans police are only allowed to chase for a crime of violence. If you don't commit one of these, then by policy, the officer has to discontinue pursuit. Someone says, and if you get a license plate number, does anything happen to the person who runs? He said, no, because I can't prove they're the one driving. If I have your car and run it, wouldn't If I have your car and run it, it wouldn't be fair to you if the cops put you out wanted. Is it time for people to start leaving the city? He said, I would say so. If you can afford it. All right, this one. I've seen stories of people being robbed or burgled and nobody shows up. I suppose an active crime takes precedent. Um, how often are you actually stopping a crime in progress versus rolling up after? What are the majority of your calls? Domestic disturbance, theft, drunks? Have you seen or experienced the kind of racism or racist sentiment within the NOPD or on the beat that we hear about in the news? He says, depending on where you are in the city, it takes days to get units out because we keep getting nailed with shootings or armed robberies, and it's just like a triage in the medical world. If you're not in immediate danger, it can wait. If you say that, I'll make you wait more, lol. Okay. Um, we stop a lot of crimes constantly, mostly homeless stuff. But I absolutely stop murders and shootings of that, I have no doubt. Okay. All right. Someone asks, what do you think of a well trained, well coordinated civilian mental health domestic disturbance response service could make a difference? He says, I think if you put a cop with a doctor and two orderlies, it could work, but the system right now ain't going to work. And the police need to stop going to domestic disturbances. Simple arguments are not actual domestic violence and not a crime that we shouldn't be going to, period. Connect them to a counselor over the phone. It's kind of a good idea. Hmm. All right, I'll end with this one. Someone asks, how complicit is the district attorney in this? It seems to get framed in the media as the police and the prosecutors constantly blaming each other for not securing enough evidence or not getting convictions, meaningful sentences, respectively. He says, one thing you have to keep in mind is that the bar for conviction is far higher than the burden of arrest. And I think a lot of people miss that when talking about the DA's office. But in my experience, when he drops charges, instead of taking it to court, I was battered a number of times on duty, and no one ever spent more than a day in jail over it. Maybe I won't end on that one because I was pretty lame. We'll end with this one then. Someone said, I'm sorry to see good police go. Thank you for serving. In your opinion, how bad has the us versus them mindset gotten? Where do you think that mentality applies in relation to NOPD? He says, I think the public doesn't vote in the best interest. Jason Williams, the district attorney, and Susan Hudson, the sheriff, got elected and did exactly what they promised to do, and crime went through the roof because of it. And it made our jobs a shitload harder, but then they complain about the crime. It's difficult, but I always think of the hardworking, good, honest people who live in these communities who just want the same thing we all want: safety and security. So, like I said, guys, New Orleans is a failed state. It's getting worse. Just open your eyes, open your ears. I think, if anything, this is just an encouraging lesson to stay well regulated, carry every day. And thanks for watching, guys. Share this video with your friends if you liked it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you watch it on Rumble, smash that Rumble button. And remember to stay well regulated. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.